Welcome back, everyone. Lily Limon loses her seat in El Paso City Council, the big surprise of the night. I'm Don Guevara.
And I'm Faran. Franzak. News Channel 9 is your local election headquarters. This is perhaps the biggest surprise and upset of the night. And for the first time, we are actually hearing from Lily Limon.
Over the last 4 years, I took on some major challenges. It was decisions that went against the contrary, against the establishment. It was issues that were very close and dear to my heart. I was certainly a proponent for Lincoln Center, for Duranguito, anti the arena.
And of course, Lily Limon, one of the council members under investigation for possible ethics violations. We think that probably hurt her chances there. The numbers between her and Henry Rivera, Limon down about 900 votes. You can see the numbers there. Henry Rivera pulling in just over close to 2,400 votes. Limon about 1,480. So a big difference there in those numbers.
And one of the things is we have our political analysts here. We have Ileana Olguin, who is the chair of the El Paso Democratic Party. We have Dr. Richard Pineda, who is a professor, and also Jaime Abetia, who is a political blogger. Again, this kind of being a big upset tonight. Your thoughts originally, I mean, did you kind of see this coming, or?
I didn't. I mean, I think that the incumbent in a couple of these seats was probably going to be safe, but I think what happened in this particular race was a couple of things. I mean, I think that Limon was definitely overshadowed by the controversy over the investigation in the Open Meetings Act violation. I think her deportment on council has been an issue that's attracted a lot of attention. In the soundbite that you heard, she talks about being anti-establishment, but to a certain extent, she represents an older generation of political activism in this town that I think has perhaps flexed its last muscle. I think this is one of the races that we can look at, I think, in the next couple of months to see how things are changing in the political landscape in El Paso.
And Jaime, as far as, you know, with her losing her seat now tonight, again, when we had our political forums here with District 7, Henry Rivera seemed a little bit more guarded. Yeah, more guarded. So what does it say with a candidate who wasn't as strong as Lily Limon in a forum, but now actually takes the cake?
I think if you look at District 7 and District 2 and look at them both, you'll see that they had, particularly in District 7, where, you know, let's be honest, Henry Rivera doesn't really, he's not really deep in policy knowledge. Most of what he said seemed to be scripted, and even though he's not a very strong candidate or doesn't appear to be very intelligent, he still won pretty handily, and that's a pretty loud statement. And then if you look at District 2, Nello didn't raise anywhere near as much money as the incumbent did, and she's the little campaign that could, and she's probably going to unseat, or at least pull him into a runoff. And I think both of those are, hey, we want anybody but you statements.
I think in fairness to the knock on the intelligence, I think there's a lot to be said with people's comfort in front of the camera. Obviously, Lily Limon, a much more seasoned politician. She's been in front of the camera. She's done this before. She came off a lot smoother. As far as Mr. Rivera, he doesn't have much camera time. He likely could have been nervous.
He came with his homework done. He had a stack of papers of all of our investigation into the alleged Texas Open Meetings Act violation. He came with his homework, I will say. His homework was done.
I think it may have been a little bit the Kennedy-Nixon kind of problem with him, where he just wasn't that experienced.
Because in the Kennedy-Nixon debates, they both understood policy. I think that
I do think it's going to be a learning curve for him.
I think he knew some scripts, but I don't believe that he really had demonstrated any depth of knowledge.
Okay, we're going to hope. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We're going to hope to hear from him coming up in the rest of the night. But we want to move on to the big race, which is that of El Paso mayor. 8 candidates vying for that seat, of course, left vacant by Mayor Oscar Leeser.
And we are going to go to Estefania Seyfert, who is live at the David Saucedo campaign headquarters for his reaction. Steph.
Yeah, well, his campaign team says that they never imagined his campaign would take off the way it did in the first place. And so they don't plan on doing anything different than what they have been doing. And a lot of it has been door knocking. They say that it's been their most effective way of campaigning, getting to know the people he wants to represent and the issues they have. One of his campaign managers tells me that even the donations exceeded their expectations.
Take some significant fiscal oversight to make sure we're staying within our means, because I don't think we can tolerate tax increases right now with everything that's going to hit.
Now, Saucedo's campaign says that they owe a lot of his platform to change and bringing a more youthful vision to El Paso. Now, it's in this part of the election that the race may start to get dirty, but Saucedo's campaign says that that's not something he plans to engage in. Reporting in Central El Paso, Estefania Safer, News Channel 9.
All right, Steph, thank you. Well, one of the things is that we were looking at is originally when the early numbers came in, DeMargo was at about 47%. Jaime, you had actually said that it was going to be more David Saucedo that was going to get more traction as the night went on, and actually DeMargo, we saw exactly that. DeMargo dropped a little bit to 45%, with David Saucedo ending in 23.95%. As a former campaign manager, what do these two have to do going forward in order to make their statement to the people of El Paso? Because, I mean, first things first is we have to get people to go out and vote in this runoff election.
Right. So now, what you're going to have is a little bit different of electorate. You're going to have people who probably sat the bench and didn't come out and vote in this first go-around because they just said, let's wait and see who's left, and then they'll make their decision. But I think Representative Margo has to now do something he probably hasn't done very much in his political career so far, and that's knock on doors. He's definitely got to actually do some actual field work in order to put it away.
And let's talk about voter turnout. We
Yes.
have more than 400,000 registered voters in El Paso County. According to the El Paso Elections website, 8.3% of registered voters actually went out and voted. Those are very low numbers, Oleana.
Very low, much lower than you would expect in a mayoral race. We do see low numbers when it's only the city council seats that are up. You see really low numbers, but usually you see higher numbers in a mayoral race, and it's very disappointing that less than 10% of our registered voters came out to vote to start the process of picking our next mayor for city council seats. So I think as a community, we need to do a better job of making sure that our voice is heard, getting out to the polls, and having a say.
And with two mayoral candidates now, both Republican, as the chair of the Democratic Party now, what are you going to tell your voters on who to vote for?
We still have to make a statement and make sure that our voice is heard. We're certainly not going to be rooting for either one of them because neither one of them represents our democratic values. They're both Republicans. They're not going to stand up to Trump. They're not going to stand up to Abbott. So what we're going to be encouraging people to do is still participate in the process, go out to vote, but not vote for either of them. So an undervote, that's the way that we're going to make our dissatisfaction with both of these candidates heard.
All right, we're going to go to Alejandra Briones. She's been covering DeMargo over at the ballpark. She has him live right now. Alejandra.
Yeah, well, the latest results show that DeMargo is just underneath 46%. He joins us now. DeMargo, this is going to go into a runoff election. It looks like everybody here is very happy with those results. What is your reaction?
Well, I'm gratified by the turnout and what we have. I'm gratified by having almost 47%. I just sorry we weren't able to put it over 50%. But when you have 8 candidates, nobody expected us to do this well to begin with.
Right, and everyone here seems to be very excited as well. Now, we spoke earlier about the runoff election. You said you were going to continue campaigning just as hard. Is there anything that you're going to do different?
Not that I can imagine, no. I'm going to run on my record of accomplishment and hope that we can continue the momentum.
We had a very low voter turnout, and this is a big race. I mean, people are voting for their next mayor. What do you have to say to those people who didn't come out and vote this time around, and to those who votes you now have to win for the runoff election?
Well, this is a critical position. When you look at our city council, first of all, they oversee a budget that's $900 million. They're responsible for the basics, life safety issues, the police and fire and public safety and those issues. So it's important. It's important. People want their potholes fixed. And we need to take it to the next level. We've got economic development and jobs we need to recruit. Education is still a big component of our ability to recruit industry and jobs. So it's a pretty dadgum important position, irrespective of having a city manager. So I would hope that people would realize that, and those are the things that we need to accomplish and take us forward.
All right, and again, real quick, I've seen you on your phone answering phone calls and text messages. What kind of reaction are you getting from your family and your friends? What are they all saying?
Well, they still call me Papa, so I feel pretty good about it. So, I'm convinced. We're fine, and we'll just continue to go forward. I think we did better than most people would have expected. However, our team thought we might be able to put it over 50%.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for joining us here tonight. All right, guys, again, DeMargo did not reach more than 50% of the votes, which means we are going to be going into a runoff election, but the atmosphere here is still one of somebody who won. Everyone's excited, cheering for DeMargo. Reporting live in downtown El Paso, Alejandra Briones, News Channel 9.
All right, Alejandro, thank you. Emma Acosta, the city rep hoping to up her position to mayor, left out of that. Instead, David Salcedo will face DeMargo in that runoff. We have a Stephanie Seyfert who's live downtown with his reaction. Steph, how's the Salcedo camp feeling tonight?
Yeah, well, the watch party has died down a little bit, but a little earlier I did catch you saying, wow, this is crazy. It was just your overall reaction to everything you lived in the last couple of hours.
You know what? When we started back in September, to get down to this moment, this is what it's all about, representing the voice of the people of El Paso. And we feel good. Our voice is stronger than ever. It's louder than ever. And I can't wait for the round. I think the people of El Paso are ready for a head-to-head between D and I.
I know you made a comment as we were watching some of the candidates that were coming up and the results. You said, wow, to some of the candidates that so far have been leading. It's a new dynamic in city council, it looks like. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the people of El Paso are just generally frustrated with the lack of leadership. I think you're seeing a lot of like-minded people emerge, and they're in runoffs. And I believe in the next 30 days, the city of El Paso will be a very different place.
And your expectations coming into this campaign and the way you've seen it play out so far?
It's everything that we expected. It met our expectations. We knew that, I'd like to congratulate D on coming in first place, but he also knows that since he didn't win outright, now we're in a runoff, that I'm going to beat him. So it's going the way we planned, and I'm just very excited about this.
All right. And again, anything different you would have done or planned to do with this runoff?
No, I mean, we did what we had to do. We did the work. We're ready. Now that the runoff, again, I think people are ready to see. We had a boxing match tonight that everyone saw, but now you're going to see D and I going head to head, and I think people are excited about it.
All right, David, thank you so much.
You.
And I'm going to go ahead and send things back to you all in the studio.
All right, Estefania, thank you.
A
lot of confidence. So we're going to bring it back now to our political analysts. So I guess from what we've heard with the two candidates, I mean, the biggest question, who do you think is going to win the runoff now?
I'm just shocked at some of the things I hear tonight. First, DeMargo, now the second coming of Big Papa. But then also hearing this detached reality from Salcedo that people are excited about the runoff. No, they're not. It's the opposite is true. They are really upset and disappointed at the field. And for him to come out, and confidence is one thing. But before voters will vote for you, they must first like you. And I think that he needs to keep that into consideration.
How about you, Richard?
Well, I think the big problem, at least in this particular race, is that it's easy to take a stand on certain issues, but there's not really an argument, at least from the Salcedo camp, about what some of those stands mean. So it's easy to say you're against the border fence, but there's not really an alternative in terms of the policies that they're suggesting for the city. So I think going into the runoff, Margo has a tremendous financial advantage, to be sure. I think that he still has a name recognition advantage, and I think that a little bit because of his experience with the school board, I think is probably going to peel off some Democratic voters. And I think in a split right now that looks to be about 3,000 votes, again, every vote is going to count. And so I think that Margo really has the advantage going into this. I agree with Jaime. I think that Salcedo is not reading the tea leaves accurately. We had an incredibly low voter turnout. We had an incredibly low voter turnout in the mayor's race with a high undervote, which means that people were not excited about this race. So he needs to figure out something to inject into the race to speed things up or to get people excited. I don't think they're there.
I want to do something, if we can, producers. If you could pull up the map that we're looking at, this breaks down the candidates in the different sections here in El Paso. I know, Jaime, you've been looking at this. You see three colors here, the dark green, which is Margo, the lighter green, which is that neon green, which is Salcedo, and the specks of red, which are Emma Acosta. What do you make about this breakdown here in El Paso? Because they're telling us the story here. Again, Salcedo coming after Margo, saying that he was getting all of his money and support from the richest zip codes in El Paso. He didn't do too shabby on the west side either.
That's true, but I think the thing that kind of jumps out at me when I look at the map is really just how much Representative Acosta underperformed. I am very surprised to see, I think she's only won 2 precincts that are in the area that she even represents. The other 4 precincts that she won, for a total of 6, are in areas that she didn't represent. So I'm surprised I knew she wasn't going to make the runoff. I'm just very surprised at how much she underperformed.
And I think the biggest question, too, on a lot of people's minds, especially after the presidential election, where the Republicans are taking over the House, the Senate, and now the executive branch, where are the Democrats? Where were they today?
Well, and I think that's one of the problems that we're seeing is that, people, the decisions that they make when they go out to vote are based on their belief systems. And here in El Paso, we know we're over 70% Democrat. And that's one of the problems with municipal elections, that they're nonpartisan. And so people don't have that, that one telling factor that they know, yes, this person agrees with my belief system. So that's what I see as the biggest problem with municipal elections. I think municipal elections should be partisan so that people have as much information possible about the people that they're voting for.
Ileana, as the head of the Democratic Party here in El Paso, do you feel you guys did enough? Do you feel you failed? Do you think there was more you could have done?
Well, I think it's hard when we're talking about nonpartisan elections. There's only so much that we can do. For example, there were several Democratic candidates who were running. And so as a party, what we tried to do was educate the community about who the Republicans were. And it's hard when it's nonpartisan.
Do you feel it's a number split, how there were, let's say 2 Republicans versus 6 more Democrats, and the Democratic votes split, and that could have played part in it?
I think most people didn't realize who were the Democrats. I think a lot of people, for example, we know that Saucedo was campaigning and claiming to be a progressive liberal, when clearly, if you look at his voting record, that's not the case.
Elisa Morales is another example. She's never voted in a Democratic primary. She's only voted in Republican primaries. So there's actually 3 candidates that were Republicans, but not take nothing away from Representative Margo. He doesn't get to 47% of the vote, no matter how low the turnout is, without a significant number of Latinos and Democrats coming out to vote for him.
All right, let's move on to another race, and that's a race that hasn't even been contested yet. It is the race for Courtney Nyland's seat. We have Stephania Seyfert is live with one of the people who's hoping.
Excuse me, it's Alejandra Briones. She is actually with Adolfo Lopez, who is with the Republican Party. We're going to go to her now for her live interview with him. Allie.
That's right, guys. I'm here with Adolfo Tellez with the local Republican Party. He is the chair now. What do you think? We had a really low voter turnout. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a number of reasons. I think the last election that we had, obviously the presidential election, took a lot of energy out of the people. I think there was a lot of issues concerned, and I think when this came up, I think a lot of people are just tired of what to do. I think it was publicized adequately. I think there was a large group of people that were running, 8 altogether. Sometimes I think that gets very confusing for people. People are used to partisan elections. This happens to be a nonpartisan election, so people don't run as a Republican or Democrat or independent or anything else. They just run to represent the city, and I think that's another thing that confuses people sometimes, because they don't know they want to vote for a party because of values and beliefs. And I think the combination of those things, people don't know what to do, and there's a lack of interest. There's more interest in the national level, and I think there ought to be more interest in the local level and in the state level for gubernatorial races, because those are the ones that impact us in a big way in our community.
So this mayoral race is going to go into a runoff election. What does DeMargo have to do now to get those voters to come out and vote?
Well, obviously it appears that the runoff's between he and David Saucedo, and I think both of them will be very aggressive at talking to people, meeting with the public, and they've been doing it a lot, and I think they need to continue doing that. They need to be talking to the different groups in the community. They need to be out on the street. I know they did a lot of block walking, and they'll probably continue to do that and try to encourage people. And then we as a party are always encouraging people. And in this case, again, it's nonpartisan, and we tell people, decide who you want to vote for and go vote. We'll continue to do that, and I think both individuals will elicit from whoever they can to help them to get the vote out, and we certainly will try to help them with that.
Right, and for this election, we saw very low numbers, under 10%. The runoff, it's even more difficult to get people to come out again a second time. Is there anything in particular, I guess, that they can do, anything different, anything extra that they can do to make sure that they get people who voted this time to come back again, and then to get the voters from the other candidates to change their vote to them?
I think it's got to be an issue race. They need to put down what they believe in, why they support it, and how they're going to do something about it. Whether it's taxes, whether it's jobs, or whether it's the economy, whatever the issue is, they need to be focused on it. They need to stick to what their beliefs are, their values, their issues, and they need to make sure that gets out to the public. Because I think that's what's going to differentiate the two candidates is experience and what their focus areas are and how it's going to impact El Paso. And I think if they come up with, either one of them comes up with an issue that El Pasoans are very sensitive about, that's important to them, where they see there's a specific impact on them, I think the population will respond. But that's hard to do, but I think they're going to be working at it to get it done.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us here tonight. And again, we are heading into a runoff election between Dee Margo and David Salcedo, and that election will take place June 10th. Reporting live in downtown El Paso, Alejandra Briones, News Channel 9.
All right, Allie, thank you. Now, what we're seeing is a Republican runoff, basically, for El Paso mayor. So, Richard, the biggest question, we've seen the country flip. Could El Paso flip from a predominantly Democratic city now to flip red to join the rest of the state, per se?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think with respect to the county chairman, I think that they have run effectively one of the worst Republican parties in the state of Texas. I mean, the largest Republican donors, I mean, some folks who are powerful in Austin and have the ability to call Washington, D.C. are not active in the local Republican Party. And that suggests that the influence that comes with donations and with contributors is not in line with what the local Republican Party has been pushing for. I think the other issue, and the thing that with the exception of this particular runoff that we're seeing, is that Republican candidates have never really been good at staying on message and consistently advocating for some kind of an alternative. I think right now, especially given the national tone of politics, you have a White House that seems to be intrinsically opposed to the border. So I think that it's unlikely that you'll see any kind of shift in the Republican Party. I think what you will see in a nonpartisan race, and I think to the point we've made tonight, is that in these nonpartisan races, it's easy to get people animated about certain issues, but that's not indicative of people moving their partisan beliefs. And even with, for Democrats, a disappointing November nationwide in Texas and in particular El Paso County, Democrats were still strong. So I don't see that kind of flip. I mean, I'm sure that the chairman would disagree, but I just think that the numbers bear out. This is a Democratic county with strong Democratic candidates, even if today wasn't the shining example of that.
And again, we only had 8% of people voting. Let's go ahead and move on now to another race. Of course, Nylander is there with one of the candidates who's also doing quite well tonight. Chorus.
Well, Don, he's doing quite well. He was leading the early voting results, but he just made the announcement, Sam Morgan here, just made the announcement to his team, his friends, his family, his staff here today that this is a runoff election, but you are at the top of polls. Well, first off, how are you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling great. You know, anyone who's in a position like this should be feeling great. I feel fantastic.
I was telling you this earlier. One thing I noticed is there's a lot of love in this room for you. So many people have come out here for you. So what is it? What is it that you've done? How do you feel you've acquired so much support and love from your community?
They're my family. This is part of I'm part of this community. They're part of me. So I'm actually from Northeast El Paso, and they're my family. That's why, there's so much love there.
So what's your plan now with the runoff election? What's your game plan? What's going to go down?
It's really simple. We're going to go ahead and hit the ground running, and we're going to go ahead and implement our next strategy, and that's to go ahead and win this runoff election. Our ground game is strong. Folks know who we are, and as you can tell from the vote, people are looking for a change, positive change to the Northeast, and that's Sam Morgan for New Northeast 5.
As a very close early voting results, very close to your counterpart, Shane Haggerty. Why do you feel it's such a close race?
I feel it's a close race because we're both committed to our campaigns. We're both from the Northeast. We're both committed to it, and I think we gave it our all. No one left anything on the table. I know I didn't leave anything on the table. Being a part of this community, I think that's the reason it was very close.
And I know you have a military background, and there were several veterans I was speaking to here today. They feel very proud of proud of you and feel you can really get this job done and done well. What do you feel is acquired that respect?
They're just serving with honor and distinction. That's what it boils down to for us. The military gives you just so much more than you can ever imagine when it comes to leadership, team building, and just planning and strategy. So I really believe those are assets that we're going to be able to bring to City Council with us.
And so wrapping up, thanks so much for being here with us. Good luck in the runoff. We're live in Northeast El Paso. Of course, now
All right, thank you, Course. Let's go to our next race. It's the race for City Rep District 2. That is Jim Tolbert is the incumbent. He is one of the candidates involved, or one of the city council members involved in that ethics investigation. He got beat out tonight by a little bit. You can see just by about maybe like 100 or so votes.
Yeah, we have Jim Tolbert with 31.94%, and then Alessandra Anello comes in with 34.96%. So again, very close, but he again was part of that alleged violation of the Texas Open Meetings Act.
So that one's going to go into a runoff, yes. Do we have Tolbert?
Let's go to News Channel 9's Patrick Hayes, who is live with Jim Tolbert. Let's see.
We don't have Tolbert. Okay, so we had him earlier, but again, this was a big, interesting race because, as we know, Tolbert won his seat because the candidate who had it before him was also part of an ethics investigation, and so now here he is, possibly losing his seat, maybe, depending on how this runoff goes, also under ethics investigation.
Right. So I wonder if we can now finally put to bed the rest, put to bed the conversation that the investigation isn't looming over these folks. The investigation is absolutely looming over them, and really the sad thing about Representative Tolbert is these were avoidable. Most of what's happened to him was avoidable. But it seems even in the case of the investigation, he went out of his way to participate in that because he wanted credit, because he didn't feel like he was getting enough credit as some of the other folks that were in that meeting. And I think that's indicative of what the ultimate result in terms of this stage of the election has turned out to be.
And one of the things is the person that's going to be in the runoff with him, Alessandra Anello, she's not from here. She just moved here. So what does this say about a candidate that's been in-house and now, yeah, the new in town person comes in and just totally blows them out of the water?
Well, I mean, in this particular race, it's not even her campaign. It's the other folks. I mean, it's a whole slate of folks who are actively voting against Representative Tolbert. So I think in the runoff, even though what we're looking at right now is a difference of about 30 votes, what I think you'll see is a very small universe. It's very easy to set up a map to canvass that area. I think you're going to see a lot of work on the part of folks who are opposed to Representative Tolbert. So I don't think it's just going to be the Anello campaign. I think you're going to see some folks in that community and in that particular universe jump in that bandwagon. So I do think going in as an incumbent, you're in a very difficult spot to try to swing the ship to a win at this point.
And we caught up with Alessandra Anello earlier tonight. Here's what she had to say.
I think the numbers show that the residents of District 2 are really disappointed in their representation and would like to see a change, and I would like to be that change. I would like to work to bring dignity and integrity back to District 2. Mr. Tolbert is under investigation, and that's not the kind of leadership we need.
But the fact that even if it's anti-incumbent, and even if my opponent threw a very dirty mudslinging campaign, for us to be just 2% behind, I think that says something about us, and we're going to make that change, and we're going to make that difference come the runoff.
What was dirty about his campaign?
I think that he's referencing the things that he found himself in that the other campaigns were using against him. And I think it's a really, really tough needle to try to thread, to be able to say people are throwing these allegations against me when in fact he was annoyed that he wasn't invited to a free steak dinner. He was offensive to somebody in the City Hall chambers. He has repeatedly put himself in these positions. So I think again the sort of reality that Representative Tolbert is looking at probably matches that shirt. It's very colorful, but it's not very accurate.
I would say if he probably is the last person to be talking about dirty in the campaign. I mean, here's a candidate who had his campaign manager show up to a candidate forum and toss some softballs and continue to argue with one of the other opponents until the boyfriend of another opponent called his campaign manager out on it. So I don't know that Representative Tolbert is actually the shining beacon of
of good campaign practices in this race.
And staying with you, Jaime, you actually had written a story about this on your political blog, but tonight we're getting the numbers of the YISD trustee incumbent Ana Dueñas. Another incumbent loses her seat to Carlos Bustil, who 29.21% for Dueñas Bustil, getting 64.33% of the vote. I mean, what another incumbent losing.
It's the second hottest race in the valley, as we talk about.
I guess
Charlie
give us
was,
some deep background on this
race. She's been a polarizing figure on the YISD board for quite some time. And she is someone that she answered a questionnaire to a local media outlet about taxes and stating, well, if there wasn't a problem with it, I wouldn't be on the Central Appraisal District, when in fact she's actually behind in her taxes. So for someone to be behind in their taxes and sit on the Central Appraisal District and expect voters not to be upset about that, I think was just detached from reality. She got thumped tonight, and that was probably the largest margin of victory, I believe, of any of the races this evening, and that was a three-candidate race. So that was a very loud message that was sent by the voters in that area that they just didn't want her.
And even though we didn't have a lot of voters turn out for this election, a lot of moves have been made to show that voters are showing they want new people. They want a clean house, or drain the swamp, as we've all been hearing from the president. But it is kind of a brand new group that's coming in now.
Which shocks me that Saucedo's campaign team hasn't really gotten onto that train a whole lot earlier. They should have been pitching him as, hey, he's new blood, even though he's El Paso's blue blood. They should have been pitching him as new blood, as an outsider, and they just have not done that. They're trying to do it now, and you see it in and he's very on message, but you'll see in all of the interviews that he does, he'll talk about, I'm not the establishment candidate. But they should have done that a long time ago. Now they're going to try to redefine him this late in the game. I just don't think it's going to work.
So within the last 3 hours, let's talk about some final thoughts. The big shocker for you tonight, of the night.
Well, even though we know that Margot had more money than all of the other candidates in that race, I was holding out hope that we weren't going to have a Republican mayor in El Paso, but I think this just underscores how important it is now for us as Democrats to make sure that our voice is still heard, that we hold his feet to the fire, that we make sure that we remind him every single day, if he ends up winning, that he is representing a town that is 70% Democrat.
Richard?
I think it's another reminder that candidates or elected officials have, I think, a different standard that they need to live and work towards. I think, in an age of social media, anytime these things happen, whether it's a circumstance that happens in the chamber, or if it's something that happens out of session, I think, as we've seen with the investigation, I think that the power of social media gets messages out. It doesn't necessarily engage the voters. I think that's what we're seeing in this election, but certainly the dirty laundry or the missteps or the mistakes are far more, they're broadcast far more wide than they ever have, and I think it means that candidates really have to think about their image, and they've got to think about the optics of almost everything they do.
And Jaime, what are you going to write about tonight?
Well, what I'm going to write about is two things. One, that if you're not happy with the slate of candidates that are left, go and undervote. That sends a louder message. That's a message that says, I don't accept any of you. But the other thing that I'm going to write about is I think that the election for mayor is going to be determined partially by the outcome in District 8. The West Side has outperformed everyone else, and District 8 is going to spell the doom of David Saucedo, because his path to victory is to flip the Valley, which, if you look at the margin of victories in the precincts that Margot won in the Valley, they were very close, and Saucedo, I think, will probably flip all of them and may run the table in the Valley. But the problem is the West Side, and the West Side's now going to have an incentive to come out because they're going to have a race on the ballot in that runoff election, and the margin of victories for Margot in those areas are much stronger.
All right, Jaime Abetia, Dr. Richard Pineda, and Ileana Holguin, thank you so much for spending these 4 hours with us. It was such a pleasure to have all of you guys here with us.
A lot of fun. Thank you.
And we thank you at home for watching on TV and, of course, on Facebook Live, as we kept you informed on the results and the big shockers. And we'll have much more coming up on the runoff elections throughout the coming days. And we want to thank you for joining us. Have a good night, everyone.